Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and a special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is Dan Willis. And Dan's been on the show before. And Dan Willis is one of the Disclosure Project's top secret military witnesses that testified at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. in 2001 in front of every major media. A world disclosure event which was asking for a congressional hearing in order to bring forth the witness scientists within the Black Projects who can release the technologies that have been hidden for over 60 years that could stop further damage to our planet. But instead, the message was sanitized by controlled mainstream media. From his personal firsthand experiences and looking into the historical indicators that have been purposely omitted from our education system that reveals the infiltration of unwarranted influences of operating behind the secrecy established for our national security system, a code which they use to control our indoctrination, which forms the public's quote-unquote agreed-upon reality in order to hide their illegal operations, and why they fear disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality. An ex-radio broadcast engineer and ABC newsman, Dan has taken a keen interest in how the media has withheld disclosure of the full message to the public, a message based on the hundreds of credible military and intelligence witness testimonies. And his website is thewebmatrix.net/disclosure. And please welcome Dan to the show this evening. Hi, Dan.
Hi. It's great to be on the show with you again,
It's great
Solaris.
to have you on. And how have you been?
Good.
Excellent.
Just been busy expanding articles on the webmatrix.net.
Exactly, and I noticed those articles, and we're going to get into those a little bit tonight. And for some of the listeners who aren't too familiar with your disclosure and what you did insofar as being part of that, can you kind of give them a brief rundown insofar as what how you got involved with that and what exactly transpired?
Sure. Yeah. Back in 1969, I was in the United States Navy. I had a high-level top-secret crypto clearance and was in charge of communications in the ship-to-shore. I was a high-speed code operator, and took thousands of messages. Top secret. One came through that really caught my attention. A USNS ship that was off the coast of Alaska. The crew witnessed coming off a port bow an extraterrestrial craft that was glowing reddish orange. It was about 70 feet in diameter, elliptical. At least I'm assuming it's an extraterrestrial. Who knows, But it shot up into space, going over 7,000 miles per hour, according to the radar operator tracked it. This was a secret priority level message going to the Chief of Naval Operations, Washington, D.C. All the authenticators made it real. And so this kind of opened up a doorway in my perception that, wow, our military is aware of something going on in the oceans. And, later research looking at U.S. naval intelligence reports and also the Soviets, they find that about more than half of the UFOs, or they call them USOs when they're in the water, unidentified submerged object, come from the oceans. So there's something going on down there in the oceans.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And what year was that?
That was 1969. About the time we were, the astronauts were dancing around on the moon.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. And of course, you were at the UFO disclosure and testified.
Yeah. What happened was, I just been kind of lightly following the issue for several years, and then a friend wanted to go to a UFO conference. And I was kind of reluctant because of all the craziness, that goes on in those conferences. Mm-hmm. But, some very credible speakers, but there's a lot of madness in there, too. Mm-hmm. But I reluctantly went, and I heard what Dr. Greer had all these hundreds of witnesses that was going to go to Washington to testify under oath. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, it was in a cocktail party, and I was holding an hors d'oeuvre plate, and he said, "Oh, could I have one of those?" And I said to him, "Oh, by the way, when I was in the Navy, I had a top secret, clearance, and I received extraterrestrial. Oh, let's get you videotaped the next morning." So I was like the 100th videotape witness. What happened was back in '93, President Clinton had a high interest in the UFO subject. So he had his director of Central Intelligence, James Woolsey, try to attempt to get the files. what happened was, to the surprise and shock of the Director of Central Intelligence, he was denied access. And so, becoming aware of the gravity of the situation, he met with some military advisors. They decided if they just bring a couple of witnesses, they get, discredited or worse. So the plan was to get hundreds of witnesses and go before the press of the world and do a major disclosure event, because these operations we have proof of at least 2 presidential administrations have been denied access, heads of Joint Chiefs of Intelligence, CIA directors, all being denied access. Is like another shadow government in control of this issue outside of our legal constitutional government. And so in 2001, I found out that one of the witnesses kind of chickened out. That was, 21 were willing to go in front of all the major media of the world. There was 22 cameras in the back row. Each one of us stated that we were willing to testify under oath before Congress, which means the penalty of perjury. There was an opening there, so I volunteered. My testimony was, I felt, least significant compared to what the other witnesses were testifying. I do have a clip that listened to other witnesses. We could do that if we wanted, but or I can just highlight some of the testimonies. What do you think, Solaris?
Sure. I think we played it before, but if we want a refresher, how many minutes is that?
Oh, it's about 6 minutes. I'll just verbally go over it. Basically, they were saying that at least 2 presidential administrations were denied access. The scientists within the Black Projects had the technology for over 60 years that could get us off of nuclear, oil, and coal and all these other dangerous, obsolete technologies. That there's a base on the other side of the moon is visually witnessed. That nuclear weapons have been shut down, on several different situations. That by 1989, we've already categorized over 57 different species of extraterrestrials interacting. And, the status of the government is they will always say there's absolutely no evidence. But here we have over 500 witnesses, which include generals, admirals, astronauts, many with supporting documentation, like many of them that brought to the press club. And, if that's not evidence, I don't know what is.
Right. No, plenty of evidence without a doubt. And of course, I think that they're obviously just masking it for their own personal agenda, obviously. But yeah, I appreciate you doing the testimony and so far as coming forward and being part of that. Now, the biggest thing I have with the UFO disclosure, and I've mentioned this before on my show, is that I'd like to see more of a disclosure insofar as the covert technology and the type of covert weapon systems that they use for mind control and psychotronic warfare. And that's huge because I think it dovetails into the MyLab. So once again, that's just one little piece of the tentacle that's extended into these programs that are associated with UFOs and anomalies and everything else.
And that's the reason why, the government continually says there's denied evidence, but, mainstream media keeps on hinting, oh, we are not alone. So what happens is people start in the government to, it's kind of interesting. Podesta made that tweet just recently saying he regrets wasn't able to do disclosure this last year. Well, if they do disclosure, what happens? You get all these embarrassing questions like, well, if you guys reverse engineered this stuff back in the 50s and you got faster than light craft and you've got, they're called alien reproduction vehicles. One of the witnesses there was involved in that testimony, then why are we still driving internal combustion engines needing gasoline? Why do we have Fukushima situations, leaking dangerous radiation, polluting the air with coal? How primitive can we get? So all these embarrassing questions come out, and then all the rogue operations and all the activities. It wasn't until after I went to the press club. I used to be an ABC newsman, so I was kind of watching how the media was going to handle this, because I thought, when I went there, I'm part of some world-changing event. I can't imagine that we're disclosing these technologies that would get us off of oil and radiation, nuclear plants, and that the government's already categorized 57 different species, and on and on and on. How could you possibly disclose all this information and not be like a world-changing event? But I found out it was. Well, I have a little 1-minute clip of the CNN coverage of the event that I could play. And what they do is the CIA controls all of the media, and especially when the subject has to do with UFOs or extraterrestrials. And they're tied into think tanks. Thousands, billions of dollars go into these think tanks that engineer consent and psychological operations in order to convey the right perception on the mainstream media. That's all tied in to Tavistock Institute. It goes way back. And so what they did was they basically said, is there life on other planets? Oh, they want to have a congressional hearing based on the reality of UFOs. And I'll just go ahead and play that little CNN to get an idea. And then I'll play right after that a really short little minute clip that shows how they took the whole hour of the first introduction speech, which, by the way, was jammed by the NSA. They had about 250,000 people logged on to witness this. Now it's all over YouTube and everything, all over the internet. Mm-hmm. But here we go with, is there life on other planets?
Life on other planets? Some former military and government personnel say they have proof there is. Elaine Quijano explains.
We've seen the photographs and heard the stories of what some say is evidence of UFOs. Now a group of scientists, former Air Force and FAA officials, is lending its voice to the argument that we are not alone. Dr. Stephen Greer heads up the Disclosure Project, a group that compiles information from people who say they've encountered extraterrestrial forms of life.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns.
Since 1993, Dr. Greer says he has videotaped testimony from more than 100 people about what they say are close encounters. People like retired Navy Commander pilot Graham Bethune, who believes he saw a UFO 50 years ago while flying to Newfoundland.
Then it appeared over to the right and moved out slowly and flew with us. It was still not at our altitude, but we could see the shape of it. It had a dome.
In addition, the Disclosure Project says it has documents supporting its case, including FAA records and CIA memos. What do members plan to do with their information? They hope Congress and President Bush take notice. They want to see congressional hearings into the matter, despite criticism from skeptics.
Those that don't want to believe you will never believe you anyway, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the truth.
A spokesperson for the Senate Science, Technology, and Space Committee says no congressional hearings are planned right now. Elaine Quijano, CNN.
You see, what CNN did was very carefully crafted so that the average person sitting back listening to the news would just say, oh, well, they want to have a congressional hearing based on the reality of UFOs. That's the perception that comes across. But the last witness says, those that believe you want to believe you, doesn't matter, doesn't change the truth. That was John Callahan, head of the FAA Investigations Division, where they had this UFO that was like 5 times the size of the 747, and they had all the radar, computer data, all this huge amounts of information, which the CIA had a meeting, and they swore everybody to secrecy and confiscated it all. But he had backups of all the information. He brought all that with him to the conference. But the perception is there nothing alerting to the public that there's been a government infiltration of rogue operations was revealed in that news report. But watch what happens in the part where everything that Dr. Greer was saying during the opening of the press conference was highly explosive. And, right where they clipped out these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been going thousands of miles, stopping and making right-hand turns. Listen to what he says immediately after saying stopping and making right-hand turns.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns. That they use anti-gravity propulsion systems, which we have already figured out how they work in classified projects in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere. That these objects have landed on terra firma, at times have been disabled, and have been retrieved specifically by teams within the United States. That extraterrestrial life forms have been retrieved, and their vehicles have been taken and studied thoroughly for at least 50 years. We can prove through the testimony and documents that we will be presenting that this subject has been hidden from members of Congress and at least 2 presidential administrations, and that the Constitution of the United States has been subverted by the growing power of these classified projects, and that this is a danger to the national security.
And that is the danger to the national security of our legal, constitutional, governed United States of America.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, right after, I was amazed at how they sanitized that completely. Mm-hmm. And, that's just one small snippet out of the whole talk. You can see that there's anybody listening about that. Oh, we already reverse engineered all these technologies and all this other stuff. And it would definitely raise red flags in everybody's minds.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So,
absolutely. And then they just do kind of an erasure on a mass level to a point where they just forget about it. None of it's accurate or real. And it's just ridiculous. But, it's 2 worlds operating simultaneously. And I've spoken about this before. There's one world that's the hidden world, the world of the unseen, which is the advanced technology, which is reverse engineered technology. And then there's the other linear illusion, the false matrix, of course, that we, quote unquote, live in the illusion of.
Indeed. Yeah. Breakaway civilization, as Richard Dolan calls it.
Mm-hmm.
The CBS team, after they saw on CNN, all 21 of us gave our testimonies and everything. They flew and met with me in San Diego and wanted to do a special exclusive interview with me. And I said, look, I'm not doing this interview unless I can just briefly say that we have the scientists within these black projects that can prove before an open congressional hearing that we have a solution to the energy crisis and the environmental crisis with technologies that have been suppressed for over 50 years. Now it's way over 60 years. Mm-hmm. They promised up and down. Basically what happened was they did a cookie cutter of exactly the same line that Dr. Greer is saying. These objects have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour. And the only thing that came out of 45 minutes of interview was we've reached a critical point where the truth needs to be revealed to the people. That's the only thing I got to say. Yeah. But the trouble is the people never got what the truth is.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And it seems to me like I would say since, I want to say around 1933 or so, we've had some serious obfuscations when it comes down to what's really happening here in America. I mean, insofar as what's happened, you can go right into what's changed in D.C. and the shifting and the dynamic that's happened with conspiracy, not in the illusion of conspiracy, but literally the hidden, that which has not been revealed. And, of course, I think it all ties right in. I personally do. But, when you look at the extraterrestrial and the illusion of extraterrestrials, they were here first, whatever you want to call them, whether they were visitors or they were here residing on this planet before mankind showed up on the map. We have to acknowledge that there is an entanglement associated with an off-world species and mankind, and that there is something going on. And in exchange, I would say to some degree, apparently, through all the evidence that was proposed at the conference.
Indeed. It's trying to figure this whole thing out. After the press club, we went to all the major cities. We did this campaign tour. I was there in Colorado and Boulder and, San Diego, LA, San Francisco, up and down the whole coast. And Dr. Greer continued on. I was in about, maybe 8 or so cities on the whole West Coast. He went across the whole East Coast and did the rest. And what they would do is rent these huge halls. A lot of them would be Masonic halls. And we have an executive briefing video that we gave. We met with senators and Congress people after the press club up on Capitol Hill, had about a half dozen meetings. And what we gave them is a 500-page briefing document and 4 hours of video testimony in which we condensed down to a 2-hour. And in every city we did this, there was like standing ovations. People just loved it, But the TV crews from the local network affiliates, ABC, CBS, NBC, all those guys, they would come in and interview. And without exception, when you watch it on the news, like San Diego had dancing alien dolls with smoke, and we heard when we were in San Francisco that they were told to make fun of it. And so what they did was they said, oh, the Disclosure Project's looking to aliens to solve the world's energy problems, and then they all do the laugh, the giggle factor, Mm-hmm. And I do have one little minute clip here of when I was in Portland, just to give you an example of the giggle factor. And the giggle factor stems from people when they're born into this reality, the perception matrix that is formed by your school education, your television, your movies, everything that helps to form your reality. And they have purposely done this little green men giggle factor in order to discredit this for so many years, that what happens when people bring this up, they kind of like, But here we go. I'm going to play the Portland news coverage of the event.
Forum on alternative energy tonight is out of this world, really. The Disclosure Project is a nonprofit research effort that identifies top secret military and government witnesses to UFO and extraterrestrial events. Project members say the government is hiding information about energy sources derived from UFOs, technology that they say could help us here on Earth.
This is an enormous issue where technologies have been illegally sequestered from the public that could completely solve the environmental problems as well as get us off of fossil fuels.
He says these technologies include anti-gravity propulsion systems, zero-point and over-unity energy. Lots of people showed up to that forum. Kurt.
Blazer fans, your long wait between playoff games is almost over. They finally tip off Game 2 tomorrow night.
Trend that might work in Portland's favor, huh?
I'm doing Kurt's thing.
Yeah, give me something, please. I'm dying out here.
UFOs and energy. Let's get to the big story.
Let's go to Shaq. He's an extraterrestrial.
There you go.
No kidding.
He can solve the world's power problems.
That's right. All right.
Wow.
Yeah, all right.
That's quite disgusting. It's really pathetic, to be honest with you. I mean, I listen to that and I'm thinking to myself, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Isn't that funny? And of course, coming from the seriousness of what's really happening behind the scenes in the underground, I mean, I don't have to tell you where I've been with covert technology. And I'll tell you, to make a jest or to laugh about it to me is just, it's very insulting. It's very, very foolish.
Well, they don't know any better. It's how they've been indoctrinated.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in the movie The Matrix, where the people have the blue pill and they go about your happy little reality and don't question anything, and it's all the official news that you see and everything. But the people who pop the red pill start to see the mechanisms behind this matrix of perception that's been created, that we've been born into,
right? And
so they're indoctrinated to laugh about it. It's a nervous laughter because it's something that people I think instinctually know there's something to it, but it's just so far out of their normal agreed upon reality that it causes a nervous laughter like that.
Wow. That's really, really wild. Well, to me, it's our celestial birthright. In other words, a lot of what's happening here, you're talking about false programming, and I believe that too. I mean, everybody's been subjected to lies since they entered onto the plane, the Earth planet, whatever you want to call it. But literally, we have a celestial heritage, and that's part of that celestial heritage, which means we have the right to know. I mean, bottom line, we have the right to know. And insofar as security and national security breaches, well, to me, I think they're risking more by not disclosing the data, because I've seen it, especially the covert, psychotronic warfare and things like that gets completely, bought and sold to the highest bidder and then misused and abused. So I think things can get out of hand very easily.
Yeah, it's all in the private hands. When you research the whole thing, how it got out of control, another personal experience I've had was after the Bush administration denied a congressional hearing. What a surprise, right? We set up a corporation we had a database of about 300 inventors in the civilian sector. A lot of people have come up with, there's a lot of brilliant minds on Earth that have not reverse engineered extraterrestrial technology, that have come up with solutions that we don't need oil or gas, or nuclear, all these different technologies that are dangerous and old and obsolete, that these corporations continue to profit from year after year. What I did was I volunteered because I have a good technical background. I worked with the Naval Electronic Engineering Center for about 13 years on just about all their electronic equipment, mostly on satellite communication stuff. And I've done a lot of unusual technology research on. And so I joined Professor Ted Loiter, who was the chief technology officer of a corporation we set up called Advanced Energy Research Organization. And I was one of a team of 6 technical advisors. Everybody had multiple doctorate degrees in science except for myself. I haven't been down that road. Just more self-taught, you could say. And what happened was one of our team members, just before releasing some information, he was murdered. That was Dr. Eugene Maloff. He was one of the 6 technical advisors. And we've had other situations where I traveled around the planet with Professor Loiter, meeting with these inventors and scientists that claimed to have over unity technologies. In other words, they create more energy than they consume. Mm-hmm. And, when I was in Dominican Republic, this one inventor had a device that was producing about 500 watts, but he said 2 CIA agents were there just before we got there, that they left. And he said, "This works, you're dead." Another Dutch inventor, brilliant mind, he wrote several volumes on the advanced calculus of the dynamics of electron fluid dynamics, way over my head, with the mathematics. But he was able to take something about the size of a shoebox and, produce about 140 watts of power. And he was going to get a patent over in Europe, and he was found slumped over with a heart attack on the way to the airport, in the parking lot. So, one situation after another. I met with a number of these scientists, inventors in San Francisco. A lot of them had their laboratories cleaned out, like with SWAT teams coming in. This one physicist was able to generate enormous amounts of power out of using a crystal. And what I noticed is a lot of them received what's called a national security order. Mm-hmm. And what that is, it's issued by the U.S. Patent Office. So as soon as they start to patent something that's over unity, appears to have room temperature superconductivity, anti-gravity, anything that could offer a solution to the world, mm-hmm. What happens is there's a national security apparatus running through the patent office that basically issues this secrecy gag order. This national security order basically tells them that anybody that they've shared this information with, to give the names to and to not reveal this to anybody because it's a detriment to the national security. And so far, we have over 5,137 of these have been logged. This is back some time ago. This is probably more now, that have been solutions by incredible minds on this planet to get us off of these dangerous, obsolete technologies, but they've been suppressed through the national security apparatus. And if you go to the webmatrix.net, one of the scientists, they sent me a copy of it. I took out his name, of course, but people can see the whole what happens to inventors and scientists when they try to come out with this. So they pretty much have the world trapped in this technological lie that we need rockets to go into space, because they had anti-gravity back in the 50s. In fact, I have a 20-second here of Mark McCanish, one of the 21 witnesses that joined me, talking about the alien reproduction vehicles.
Personally witnessed 3 flying saucers at a very large hangar at Norton Air Force Base. The presentation that Brad talked about was for top military brass and certain congressional, but the fact that there were 3 discs at that exhibit, these discs were hovering off the floor without any visible means of support. They were referred to as alien reproduction vehicles.
Well, this is the kind of technology that they had back in the 50s. So, we could be living in a world that, when you were a kid, you're thinking of, oh, wow, everybody could have their own little flying saucers, so to speak. We wouldn't need paved roads. We could have anti-gravity vehicles. All of these nuclear power plants could be retrofitted with zero-point energy, take down all the power grid lines. Every house and business could have a little box that could supply all the power they need. We could desalinate the oceans. I mean, but it's not so much a matter of the multi-trillion-dollar industry that the oil industry and nuclear and everything is. It's more about geopolitical control, because if they release these technologies, that means third world countries would be brought up to standard substantially. And right now, the United States is basically, with the petrodollar and everything there's the BRICS, which is attempting to go around the petrodollar, which has been this terrible situation that, when Eisenhower warned of the misplaced powers of the industrial military complex, that they would basically need to create one enemy after another enemy in order to keep this machine going that keeps making new weapons, and the new weapons then become obsolete. They need more new weapons and trillions of dollars, going into these things. All this could go to people who are starving on this planet, instead of this type of situation. So
right. Yeah, it doesn't have to go this path, that's for sure, Dan. And that's the problem. That's what I find so frustrating, is because we understand that there is a technological advancement that's been hidden. And the fact of the matter is we don't have to be going in this direction at all. We shouldn't be. But for some reason or another, there are certain cabals that are forcing this and pushing this agenda, which doesn't make any sense to me at all. Just like they're trying to silence the truth. In other words, if you come up with anything, whether it's connected to higher consciousness or an advanced technology, they want to get their hands and fingers on it and silence everybody. Now, you did mention something about what you posted on your website pertaining to some of the control mechanisms that Google's trying to do insofar as shutting people off or deciding who's telling the truth and who's not, which I find to be really strange, to be honest.
Yeah, I was shocked just to learn about this yesterday. I put it on the timeline on the webmatrix.net, and you can read about it along with all the other things that they're doing. But yeah, they have what Google's called the knowledge vault, and they believe that there's too much junk information and that's not based on truth. So Google is going to become the Ministry of Truth, where probably working hand in hand with the CIA perception management teams, will determine what sites are going to, when you do a Google search, what's going to come up there. Let's say if you're wanting to find out about GMOs, all of a sudden, all these websites will come up and fill the top of the search engine and say, science has shown that GMOs are healthy and good for you, and it helps feed the rest of the world and everything. So you're going to have that type of thing. Or you have concerns about vaccination and some of the side effects. You're going to have that kind of information. Or about government corruption or secret operations or voting fraud, or anything that it will now determine what is truth and what's not. And so this is going to be another tool in the perception matrix. And this is going to be a big one, too, because look at all the people that use Google.
Right.
I
mean, there's enough disinformation out there, don't get me wrong. I mean, you have to really sift through a lot of these stories and pieces of information. But at the same time, when you have something like Big Brother trying to censor everything and, of course, obviously skew it to a point where anything that's really hardcore truth-based is going to be censored and omitted, of course. So, yeah, that's a problem. And I hope that this doesn't continue insofar as the way we are losing what appears to be our freedom. Very concerning to me on so many different levels. I mean, you take away people's gifts of whatever it is, whether it's artists or inventors or whatever it is, and you try to censor everything to a point where you just shut down the spirit and you snuff out the soul, which to me is inexcusable.
It's all about the perception matrix, and I mean, look at the mainstream media. It's
you work for them,
by the CIA.
So when you were working for mainstream, I mean, did you get that same vibe? Did you pick up on the manipulation factor?
Well, I was not a big TV anchorman for a big network or anything like that. I was a broadcasting engineer for many years, the most powerful FM station on the West Coast, and I would do the news reports. Just a simple job. And I would rip off we had two teletypes. This was back in the late 70s, by the way. And we had one from American Press, another one from UPI, United Press International. And you basically you read the script. And everybody out there, every single ABC, NBC, CBS, in fact, Russia Today did a real interesting thing where they did recordings across the United States of different networks, like what's CNN saying, what's Fox saying, what's ABC saying. And there was this unique line that, let me find it here. I'll just play it, just a moment of it. It says, economic sanctions. The Easter Bunny has lost some spring in its step due to economic sanctions. And what's happening is that's a very, very unique statement. And so every news reporter back there you see on your television set is reading a teleprompter. And that teleprompter is getting information that is specially provided for them. They control the distribution. The news reporters are innocent people just doing their job and are reading the scripts. And here's an example of several different networks all reading exactly the same script.
Consumer news, economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring.
Wow.
Enough of that. Okay.
That's weird.
But that goes on for 2 minutes. I just gave you like 15 seconds or something. But what that shows is that everybody is reading the script that they're provided. And so they don't know whether it's true or not. But then you have, we rely on journalists, right? The journalists are supposed to be out there getting the truth to the networks. And then the networks are distributing the information to the public, right? But what you have is the CIA paying journalists, and they're what you call a non-official cover, which means that they are writing stories or given the script by the CIA to write a story, but if they're ever caught that they are doing that with the CIA disavows any knowledge of them whatsoever. So that's what's a non-official cover. There was a 3-time award winner from CNN, Amber Lyons, has something to say about this. This is like 20 seconds.
What CNN is doing is they're essentially creating what some people have termed infomercials for dictators. And that's this sponsored content that they're airing on CNN International that's actually being paid for by regimes and governments. I mean, this violates every principle of journalistic ethics because we're supposed to be watchdogs on these governments. We're not supposed to allow them to be paying customers as journalists.
That's right.
Yeah, it seems like everything's been contorted and twisted, and like I said, it's an upside down, inside out world these days, isn't it?
Well, it's a reality perception matrix, and there was another witness that came out last year, a very brave individual to do this, because you don't go against a big intelligence agency and sometimes live, so. Dr. Let's see, I can't pronounce his last name, Dr. Udo Jokoti, he's in Germany. Mm-hmm. If I may, I'd like to play his little testimony. He was a non-official cover that was trained to lie and put out disinformation, but his conscience was bothering him about it, and he wanted to come out publicly and say, how that the CIA is making me write these stories, which are not true. Mm-hmm. Here we go. This is Dr. Udo.
Well, I've been a journalist for about 25 years, and I was educated to lie, to betray, and not to tell the truth to the public. Now, you ask, what have I done for intelligence agencies? So, please see, most of the journalists you see in foreign countries, they claim to be journalists, and they might be journalists, European or American journalists, but many of them, like me in the past, are so-called non-official cover. That's what the Americans call that. I have been a non-official cover. Non-official cover means what? It means you too work for an intelligence agency. You help them if they want you to help them, but they will never, when they find out that you are not only a journalist but a spy too, they will never say, oh, this was one of our guys. They will not know you. That means non-official cover. I give you an example, not the German foreign intelligence, Bundesnachrichtendienst. It is just a sister organization of the Central Intelligence Agency. It was founded by the American Intelligence Agency. So one day, the BND, this German Foreign Intelligence Agency, came to my office at the Frankfurter Allgemeine in Frankfurt. And they wanted me to write an article about Libya and about Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. I had absolutely no secret informations regarding Colonel Muammar Gaddafi and Libya. But they gave me all these secret informations, and they just wanted me to write, to sign the article with my name. I did that, but it was an article that was published in the Frankfurter Allgemeine that originally came from the Bundesnachrichtendienst, from the German Foreign Intelligence Agency. So do you really think that this is journalism, intelligence agencies writing articles?
Yeah.
Very interesting, Dan.
It's good to hear these people, and I'm sure there's many more, that are out there.
Well, you need to highlight it, though, and the bottom line is, especially what's going on with the internet today and mainstream media and any kind of media, you really have to take a good look and see who's pushing the agenda and who's actually writing these articles and what is their motive behind it. Is it damage control or is it something else? And like I said, the truth seems to be such a threat to so many. And thank goodness we have a few people out there who actually do come out and tell the truth.
Yeah, it's good that I played a little audio clip, so it's not just me saying this. I'm just a witness, and I'm one of over 500 witnesses. Right. I'm not a UFOologist. I'm not a historian. I'm not a journalist. I'm still working on trying to improve my writing skills, but it wasn't till I saw all these things, aware of these hundreds of witness testimonies, aware of many leaked top secret documents that came to surface that substantiate all this. I became aware of all this, but I didn't understand how how this operation got to be the way it is. So it's creating this matrix of perception. It wasn't until a company out of Hollywood, a media company, wanted me to write an article because they knew I was an ABC newsman and a witness, and that I, kind of focused on talking about the control in the mainstream media regarding the UFO extraterrestrial issue. And so I wrote this article called "Who Controls the Agreed Upon Reality Through the Mainstream Media, and Why Do They Fear Disclosing the Truth About the Extraterrestrial Reality?" And so I had to do research, and I happily took on the job because I wanted to find out for myself. I needed to fill in the pieces of the puzzle, of this huge, complex puzzle in which presidents and CIA directors are being denied access, and the media seems to be controlled by this group in order to sanitize it. And so I had to look back, and as best as I can understand so far, it looks like a cabal group that's been around for some time, basically infiltrated. You can go all the way back to 1776, back to when Rothschild was planning on writing the doctrine for the Bavarian Illuminati, where he was talking about control of the press as one of the key things, and Adam Weishaupt infiltrated into the Scottish Rite Freemasons back then. And you look at all the people, all the presidents and things that have been associated with the Freemasons and media and NASA and everything else. There seems to be all these people that are, Skull and Bones or Knight of Malta. So there seems to be, when you're in that level of secret society, you're having to keep a blood oath of secrecy. And so people keep secrets pretty well. So it would be a perfect cover in order to have an inner circle, because the way secret societies are set up, it's set up in a pyramidal type of form where it's like a military, where it's a chain of command, where the higher levels of the inner circle distribute the commands down to the lower levels. And there's millions and millions of Freemasons across the planet. But the higher degrees of Freemasonry give basically orders to the lower degrees. And so, you look at the list of people that are 33rd degree Freemasons, which is the highest level, which, by the way, you can't do anything to get to the 33rd degree. You have to be selected. It's like an honorary degree. So looking back through history, I'm looking at you see these same names of the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, J.P. Morgans, the banking elite, the people with the money. They, back in 1917, they bought all the newspapers, and then they put their own editors in place so that they could manipulate the stories to their agenda, so to speak. So this was going on way back when. Mm-hmm. And then the first... back in 1938, when Orson Welles was doing the fake broadcast of the alien invasion of War in the Worlds, that was actually Rockefeller funded that whole operation, and they were doing an analysis of the psychology of terror to see what it would, and they found out they were able to statistically break it down out of the 6 million people that heard the broadcast and figured out so many people thought it was real. Some committed suicide. Some went, tried to prepare for the alien invasion and everything. So they keep feeling the water to see how they can manipulate, because they carefully studied the Nazis and the Nazi propaganda. In fact, Roosevelt, 33rd degree Freemason, along with the 33rd degree Freemason Churchill, sent General Wild Bill Donovan of the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, over to Tavistock in England to get psychological warfare training. Mm-hmm. And the plan was to have a full spectrum dominance over the public's perception and decision-making abilities to completely control that matrix. This is back in This is back in 1938.
Mm-hmm.
So by the cabal seemed like it was always looking for ways in order to conduct its operations yet have a cover so it can operate in complete secrecy. So what happened was the Nazis were funded actually by the cabal. Alan Dulles was there at the first meeting back in 1933 that funded Hitler with the banks and everything. And by 1944, the Nazis had figured out a fallback plan that they knew the war was going to lose with Germany, attacking, with the United States. And so what they had a plan called Weltanschauungskrieg, which means worldview warfare. They figured they could infiltrate into the United States and over a long period of time manipulate the perception matrix, through the mainstream media, education, and entertainment, so that they could basically infiltrate and take control. But the purpose of this matrix of perception was to hide their secret operations, because the Nazis developed anti-gravity craft a long time ago, and 250,000 of them, along with the top scientists that didn't come over in Project Paperclip with the NASA, 3,000 Nazi spies under General Reinhard Gehlen came into the CIA with the help of Alan Dulles, who, working with James Angleton, the chief of CIA counterintelligence, to rewrite all the paperwork, give them new identity papers, so all the Nazis all went free, all through Argentina and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But, the truth actually, the whole idea, when I first found out about the Antarctic base, that the Nazis went down there and set up this entire base down there because Himmler believed in the ancient yugas in the Sanskrit, where there would be different worlds. One would be destroyed, and then the next one would be happening. And they believed that Antarctic was Atlantis at one time, and they're finding pyramids down there. So I wouldn't be surprised. And when a pole shift happens, ice will melt, and then the Nazis can come out and sunbathe on the beach, and the rest of humanity be wiped out, So you'll have this Aryan master race, and Himmler, apparently, they had like 500,000 Germanic bloodline women, of which they picked 10,000 of them to go down there to repopulate this whole thing. The truth is actually stranger than fiction,
Mm-hmm. And let us not forget the off-world existence. I'm sure there are many different offshoots of the technology itself and the people involved who are actually residing on other planets.
Right. And look what, because the truth of this whole thing really keeps its own best secrecy, because you take a regular person who's been indoctrinated into this false reality matrix, you tell them the truth, and they look at you like a conspiracy nut. You're totally crazy. But if you can look into it, well, Google's going to fix that.
Forget it now, right?
There's going to be, a whole different perspective. And this is, there's some great historians. We got Jim Mars, you have Joseph P. Farrell, we got Richard Dolan, you got a lot of people who have done the work, and I have the references to all these things and the top secret documents, on the webmatrix.net article. Mm-hmm. But what happened was, right at the end of World War II, in 1946, the Rockefeller Foundation went into our education system and rewrote the history books of what actually happened at the end of World War II. They tried to get support from the academic community, and they said, hell no, And so what they did was they created their own people in order to write this history. So to me, it seems like that seems so criminal for anybody to be able to go in and rewrite what the real official history is of World War II.
Right.
And that was 1946, and then, in 1950, Alan Dulles set up Project Mockingbird, which basically started the whole interface with all the mainstream media, so they basically own everybody, as one of the things William Colby said that one of the CIA directors. And then in 1951, shortly after that, the very first movie is under Project Dove, that every single UFO or extraterrestrial or related to the moon entertainment movie has been altered the script so that the perception of the public is manipulated in such a way as to gain a certain perception. Mm-hmm. If we believed Hollywood, that all the extraterrestrials are like what you see on Independence Day, and just the myriad of evil alien movies that all these extraterrestrials wanting to come to Earth and destroy us and take over a planet, there is this perception. But we know that there was a leaked report back in the 60s called the Report from Iron Mountain, where they had planned on creating a false threat from outer space. And, they had the stuff to do it. As you just heard Mark McCandish talking about the alien, this is stuff in the 50s. You can imagine what they have now. As Ben Rich, head of Lockheed Skunk Works, said in 93, anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. We can take ET home, except it would take an act of God to ever get it to come out to benefit humanity. Mm-hmm. So,
which is a disservice to humanity. By the fact that they're hiding it and the fact that they're not trying to do something to advance this race on this planet is just I can't figure that out. For the life of me, I'm just like, why can't they just get it together and start working together on a higher level and getting everything moving in the right direction?
Well, the Weltanschauungskrieg has been working really well for them. The worldview warfare. Right. And probably one of the most powerful elements is that Professor Isaacs in London is talking about in 1957 that there was this huge conspiracy of 30 universities going through the elements of psychology and sociology and removing anything having to do with the power of human consciousness. It seems they were very much afraid that we become aware that we have this power within it, that we're not disconnected. We're all part of a global collective consciousness that can actually form reality. I mean, this gets into one of the reasons why they removed all references to the occult back when they took out the history information back in 1946. It took out all the stuff having to do with the occult with the Nazis, because the Nazis were very, very much into understanding out-of-box concepts of consciousness and things. And, when you get into the secret societies, you go into the teachings that basically derived from the ancient mystery schools back during the time of Akhenaten.
Mm-hmm. Right.
If you
go ahead, Dan.
If you look at, are we coming up to the hour?
In a few minutes, we're good. We have about 2 minutes plus or minus.
Oh, okay, all right. And if you look at the skull of Akhenaten, which they try not to play this down, but if you look at the skull of Akhenaten, that is not a human skull. It's like it's this long, elongated skull which they found in Egypt, they found in Peru, they found in different parts of the world. So. These teachings, basically, that the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and other mystery schools derived from, teach about the matrix of consciousness and time and space, and what that interface is and how to work with it. Something that's not taught in the normal public schools.
Right, and it should have been. So, that's the bottom line. And of course, we'll get into that in the next hour. We're going to get ready to take a break here real quick, but stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back with Hyperspace and my special guest, Dan Willis. Welcome back, everybody, to the Dark Matter Radio Network. This is Hyperspace, and I'm Solaris BlueRaven, and I'm here with my very special guest, Dan Willis. Dan, you with me?
Yeah, I am.
All right. And we were discussing, it's a little bit of an echo back there. I'm not sure what happened. Can you get that? Do you hear that feedback?
Not hearing an echo on my end.
All right. I guess we'll be okay with that. But yeah, it's interesting. You were touching on how many, well, obviously history has been rewritten on so many different levels, but think about how many centuries history has been rewritten and censored. I mean, a lot of what we're looking, even in the illusion of the past, with the architectural structures and things, obviously has been, kind of revamped, so to speak. Wouldn't you say?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very, very. Keeping everybody within a certain perception matrix, and just going back just to finish up the idea of how they were able to insulate themselves and use our national security apparatus. I just recently finished a work by Dr. Michael Salla, and the thing that always got me was when James Angleton, who was a Knight of Malta, where they were burning all of his counterintelligence documents that was connected with Allen Dulles and the whole infamous group that was working with the Nazis and everything. They were trying to destroy it, and he was able to pull out one of these top secret MJ12 memos. And there's a part in it that I didn't understand before. It was called Project Environment. And what it is that when, see what happened, Nelson Rockefeller funded Eisenhower's campaign. And so when Eisenhower came into office, he had Nelson Rockefeller restructure everything. So what he did was he had a secret executive order, and we had the original MJ12 group that was from the Truman administration. Well, they scrapped that. They put all the cabal members with Allen Dulles as MJ1, and they basically insulated our legal constitutional government from the Eisenhower administration, so that it got to the point where Eisenhower was threatening to use the army in Colorado to go in and invade and rip Area 51 apart, because in 1955 they set up Area 51 and S4. S4 was where they did the extraterrestrial reverse engineering. By the way, I did you were not supposed to do any videotaping, but I did, of Bob Lazar talking for 2 hours when I met over outside of Area 51 with him, and I put the video up on the webmatrix.net about the reverse engineering. But what happened was, back in 2005, Richard Dolan interviewed one of the 2 CIA operatives that Eisenhower sent over to Area 51, and they met with extraterrestrials and they saw the advanced technology, but Eisenhower was out of the loop, and that's why when he left with his farewell speech, he talked about the warnings of the misplaced powers, and then Kennedy, when he came into office, Kennedy was also already aware of the extraterrestrial issue, because he was close friends with James Forrestal, which they murdered, which was one part of the original MJ12 group. And he joined him back in 1945 after we won the war with Germany. The Nazis all escaped, but we won the war with Germany. And they were reviewing the Nazi extraterrestrial technology. The Nazis' indications are they cut a deal for an technology exchange program back in 1933. Our U.S. government did it in 1954 with the Eisenhower administration. And the technology that they saw over there in post-war Germany was just so far beyond anything that we can imagine. That's part of the reason why we brought over the paperclip scientists. Mm-hmm. And so Kennedy was aware of these technologies, especially with James Forrestal being one of the MJ12 members and being the Secretary of the Navy and sharing all this. So what happened was Kennedy was aware that the very frustrated Eisenhower was being denied access. See, the CIA basically controls Area 51, and MJ12 oversees it. And so what happened was Kennedy asked Allen Dulles, who was the director of Central Intelligence for him at that time, for the information and an overview on the MJ-12 activities. Alan Dulles denied him that. Mm-hmm. And so he fired him. And what happened was in 1963, he sent another request to the new, which was McCall. He was the replacement CIA director. And what happened was Alan Dulles, right after the first request, set up an assassination directive that it doesn't matter who you are, the president or whoever, anybody tries to penetrate, and because the document, it says, that Kennedy was looking into their activities, and this we must not allow for the continuance of our group, because they were doing all these kind of subversive activities behind the scenes using our national security apparatus. So what happened was, when Kennedy sent that second request, which was just 10 days before he was murdered on November 12th, 1963, that executed the sequence in order to murder him. Anyway, I've detailed it out on the webmatrix.net. So this is what happened. Ever since Kennedy was murdered, basically the cabal has taken control. And they operate to this day.
Right. And when you're defining the cabal, are you defining the cabal as CIA or something outside?
Well, there is, as Edward Snowden said, there's our legal constitutional government, but then there's a shadow government operating behind. Mm-hmm. It's like you have... it's like one of the witnesses that joined me, like Donna Hare, like at NASA, about some people are aware of airbrushing the UFOs out of the pictures, and other people don't have a clue. So you have, I guess, some CIA operatives that are working with this agenda, and
multiple
some
layers.
that aren't. So we have a split, just like they said back in the 40s. We had two CIAs. One was hunting down Nazis, and the other one was recruiting them. So we know that J. Edgar Hoover, who was a 33rd degree Freemason, by the way, he was well aware that Hitler, they had all the information. Hitler and Eva Braun and her dog, what was the dog's name? Anyway, Goldie, right? Blondie, that's it. I couldn't remember the dog's name. Anyway, they all escaped, and along with Heinrich Himmler, too, because they found out the doppelganger, I guess, the fake Himmler, didn't have a fencing scar on his cheek and a bunch of other discrepancies. So Himmler escaped as well, which he knew he would, down to base 211, which is the Antarctic base, which, they tried to send a military armada back in 1946 with Admiral Byrd, but they were defeated by flying discs coming out of the Antarctic waters, and that was all hushed up. And Admiral Byrd, by the way, is a 33rd degree Freemason, so they keep secrets pretty well, just like Buzz Aldrin's a 33rd degree Freemason. You have all these different people.
Right.
So,
and you and I both discussed that we both have relatives in the Masons that are pretty high up as well. So I never noticed anything weird. but I think there's a lot that's not communicated. It's the bottom line when it comes down to these hidden areas, I guess you could call them. I was going to ask you about the flying disc coming out of the water real quick before I didn't mean to interrupt you. But the flying discs you were mentioning in Antarctica, were those connected to, would you say, reverse engineered craft? Not necessarily off-world, but reverse engineered by the Nazis?
My guess is that it could be either, since the Nazis already had working craft that was working well before this, it could be either that, or it could have been... they say that there's also extraterrestrial bases down in Antarctica as well, and that they cut kind of a deal with them, because you have to wonder, back in the 60s with the Betty and Barney Hill case, where, Betty was able to look at the map of where they come from, which was a 3D map that they were able to put together and show it was coming from Zeta Reticuli, and Barney, under deep hypnosis, on board the craft, he saw what he called an evil-eyed Nazi. So this could have been the first of paramilitary operations that are being done, joint extraterrestrial and military, with the Nazis. And I think the cabal is just basically, the Nazis are just a faction within the cabal operating together in this whole operation, because they were trying to see how easily the public is fooled. And one of the things they did was George Adamski, which was a CIA asset that would, it's kind of interesting. You look at the Venetian scout ship that he took a picture of, is exactly identical to the later diagrams of the Reich saucers. So, and this was, back in the 1950s. And so what Alan Dulles would do, every scientist would go out and try to discredit Adamski. Alan Dulles, the CIA director, would go out and personally persuade them to back off. And because the whole idea was to see how easily, the public could be fooled. And one of the things that the CIA director for Ronald Reagan, William Casey, said that in Project Dove is that part of the reason they keep the secrecy, at least this is what they explained to Reagan, was that if people see their advanced anti-gravity craft, that they naturally just assume it's extraterrestrial, not think it's anything else. So it acts as a good cover for that.
Exactly. That's just very, very interesting right there. There was a bit of a question I had from someone who's listening who texted me. He wanted you to address the UFO crash in Peru. I sent you a little bit of a text here in the message box. Do you see that at all? With Jonathan, is it Weygand? Lance Corporal, Disclosure Project witness?
Yeah. That was in Peru. This one, he was in the Marines, right?
I don't know the story.
Yeah. He, here's his testimony, just really quick. It's only about a minute long,
wow.
But
you can find that quickly.
Oh yeah, I'm very organized over here. What happened was, see, these regular military guys can get involved in these things, but there's this black ops that come in. These guys don't have any name badge. They don't have anything. They come in and they just threaten the heck out of people, just like Larry Warren over in the Brentwaters. They hit him upside with a gun butt, and made him sign all these papers. And this gives you an idea just how ruthless these people are. You can hear his testimony here.
I was arrested. I had all my gear taken from me by men in black camis, had no name tags. They were older men, probably in their late 30s or 40s. There were other people, I guess they were government, I don't know. They were there and they had containment suits. And then they put me on a cot that they had, and they had me cuffed with those, they had me cuffed both hands down, and then they had my legs tied together with those plastic fasteners that the police use. And they had a lieutenant colonel from the Air Force, and he did not identify himself. He might have, I just don't remember. And he told me, if we just took you out in the jungle, they'd never find you out there. And I'm like, well, and I didn't want to say, I didn't want to test him to see if he'd really do that. So I said, yeah. And he's like, you got to sign these papers, and you never saw this, and I don't exist, and this situation never happened. And if you tell anybody, you'll just come up missing. And he was a real abrasive. And they're yelling at me, and they're hollering and cursing. And you didn't see anything, and we'll do you and your whole goddamn family. And they're it was basically that for about 8 or 9 hours. And these guys, they're just off on their own. There's no oversight, no control. They just do whatever they want. They don't. And they're evil, man. These people are evil.
Yeah, they're ruthless. They will do anything in order to maintain the false perception matrix so people don't find out about what's really going on behind the scenes.
Let me ask you something, Dan. Why do you think they just don't leave? If they're this way, why all the games being played out? Why don't they just, terraform another planet and live there with their breakaway society? Why is there an interaction that's completely dysfunctional, and of course screen memories and mind control and everything else that goes along with it. Why can't they just kind of break away with grace?
Well, there's a lot of resources on this planet, that
Yeah.
like some of the heads of, let's say, Brzezinski, one that started with Rockefeller, the Trilateral Commission, he's afraid that because of the alternative media, thank you, Solaris, that, there's this global awakening happening right now. And this is no doubt, the move Google is making, in its sanitizing and becoming the caretaker of what's true and what's not true. Mm-hmm. It's all a matter of creating this reality perception matrix, and the attorneys write these laws, like the NDAA that come up. There was an amendment to it that makes it legal to use disinformation and psyops on the American public that we're paying $4 billion to have this done. And they're using these military sock puppets and NSA trolls and CIA shills, rather, to manage online perception so they can gain false polls. And if somebody posts something, like, GMO, they found that the rats are getting these huge tumors, and somebody will come on and say, oh, no, that's all nonsense, it's not true, or talk about extraterrestrials and say, I found one of those guys. I was posted something onto a group, and he blocked me. And he said, no, all the disclosure projects are all fake. And it was interesting is his friends with Clifford Stone, who was gave the testimony of the 57 different species, and he said, I'm trying to get him to come clean, that he all made it all up. You've got these people, and they're actually soliciting online to pay people to give the rest of the population this information in order to create and keep this false reality matrix that people get indoctrinated into.
Right, and the whole idea is to tear that false matrix down and just let everything reveal itself. And I think that is happening slowly. But what I'm seeing is a lot of resistance coming from the opposing forces. Obviously, if they're trying to censor more on the internet now, and they're trying to pull strings insofar as what's valid and what's not, and of course we all know where that's going to head, then obviously we have some things up ahead of us which we need to deal with. And in order for us to advance as a civilization, we've got to be clean with all of this stuff. Literally, they need to put all the cards on the table, and everybody needs to just stand down, tell the truth, and relax. So I don't know what the big deal is. I could see it from a higher perspective and think that I think it would be better on an energetic level to just communicate the truth. But, these guys have an agenda.
Well, we could be, as they say, preaching to the choir, to the listeners here, because probably the listeners to the show are pretty savvy. They're open to this sort of thing. So you and I don't really know, I guess you could call them the blue pill people and the red pill people, what kind of ratio that really is. But the people who do know, the people are the collecting yottabytes up in Bluffdale, Utah, with quantum computers with artificial intelligence monitoring every single communication on this planet with backdoors to everything. So basically, with a quantum computer technology, I don't think anybody has an idea of just how incredible this technology is. Because normally the military uses 512-bit encryption, which would take the best computers that we have, not what the NSA have, it would take the known age of the universe in order to decrypt. With a quantum computer, it operates in parallel processing lines into, I'm still getting my head around it. But in other words, it takes only a couple of minutes to a few seconds in order to decrypt any communication on the planet. So you can imagine with artificial intelligence, it can understand, like, say, the conversation you and I are having right now. Definitely this is going on to the red flag area. Lovely. it knows how many people are basically, as Brzezinski said, the fear of the global awakening. Well, how many people are catching on that they've been indoctrinated into this false reality matrix, and how many people are just basically trying to survive, doing their 9 to 5, coming home, having a beer, watching the evening news, and just watching the football games, and just doing the normal world. They don't want to really hear all this, and I don't blame them in a way.
No, I don't either.
All the conspiracy theorists. Because if you look on the internet, there's just so much. It's overwhelming.
And
all
it's
the
very
information
toxic.
that's out there.
I mean, Dan, some of it's very, very noxious. I mean, even the stuff I dove into, but not by my choice. I mean, it's not positive. And of course, nobody wants to go there. Nobody wants to go into these dark corridors and communicate this kind of information. Nobody wants to live there. I would rather have a happy life smelling flowers. But at the same time, when you think about it, everything's kind of encroaching upon us. And it seems like our freedom of being able to be free spirits is just being, completely snuffed out.
It's truly a Pandora's box, because as soon as you became aware, that this thing, it's like, I don't know how to say it. It's like, you're walking over a bridge and you hear this little baby that somebody abandoned, down on underneath the bridge, and let's see, do you just keep walking across the bridge? I didn't really hear that. Or, it makes you take notice, and the more you dig into it, the more you go, oh my God. And the more you dig in deeper, the more you go, oh my God, And it's like that, the truth matrix that's been hidden from everyone,
Right.
So, I've wondered myself, when I toured across the United States, I was one of the website administrators, and I set up an online fax with embassies around the world and the president and all the representatives, and about 30,000 faxes went into Washington. This was pre 9/11, and it's interesting. Von Braun was talking about, the first would be the Soviet threat, which would be a lie, which we found out that was a lie because Allen Dulles and Reinhard Gehlen was lying to President Truman on the Soviet estimates in order to funnel all this money into the Nazis and the CIA and their black operations. That was like $6 trillion. And then they were talking about terrorists, and this is 4 months before 9/11, and that 13-year war has cost over $6 trillion. And then later they said there's going to be, a false extraterrestrial threat, which people like Clinton and Reagan, keep hinting at, and which was in the report from Iron Mountain, and von Braun's deathbed testimony. So they had these plans way ahead of time. But anyway, you can see the fax responses on the webmatrix.net. I put them all up there, from the president and all the representatives, how they responded to this issue. And what I found in doing an analysis of all it, they were basically out of the loop, which is not a surprise. They basically letters of denial, or we'll keep your views in mind, thank you very much, form letters type of thing. So basically, Congress is out of the loop on this thing. As you can imagine, if CIA directors and presidents are out of the loop, of course Congress would be out of the loop. So, going before the mainstream media and willing to testify under oath and meeting with senators and Congress people and touring across the United States really didn't do a whole lot. It made it okay on the alternative media. There's a lot of YouTube videos about disclosure witnesses and things. So it makes me question to myself this situation that's happening in the world, and how can we possibly transform it?
Right.
So I'm starting to look.
Go ahead.
Yeah, how do we transform this? These are things that are happening in what we perceive in the outer world, but there's a reason why they took out in all the universities about the power of human consciousness. Because when you start getting into the metaphysical studies of understanding the power of our belief and our perception, and people start seeing the glitches in this matrix.
Right.
And as soon as they start seeing the glitches, and then what happens is they start to ask questions. And if Google's giving them the right answers, you start start prying the Pandora's box of all the little secrets that have been hidden in the reality perception.
Right. Well, I guess we need to do Oracle because Google's not going to be the right Oracle for the database. But I will say one thing. I mean, you touched on something which is true, the outer world and the inner world. And we all know, those of us who have done spiritual work and mysticism in the occult, and obviously that's my background, consciousness changes reality. We all know this. And they know this in the underground. They know this in the black technology and the black intelligence program. They understand how consciousness affects everything and also how frequency changes reality and how frequency can alter states of consciousness as well. So those are the key. When they talk about taking ET home, it's through consciousness. And everybody knows this. I mean, it's a kind of a no-brainer to those of us who are on the path of mysticism. But, that's something that the mainstream, that specific society does not yet grasp for whatever reason, and it could be because it's been edited from many textbooks.
This is the deeper level of understanding of the agreed upon reality that all of us perceive is going into, because time and space are actually illusionary. Mm-hmm. Just like, for example, you could be having a great fun time and all of a sudden, I didn't imagine. Time just flew. Or you could be at work and can't wait for 5 o'clock, and that minute hand is just going really, really slow. So
right.
Time is all relative, and so is space. Space can be manipulated as well. And
exactly.
When they actually, the Nazis back in 1944, they found the King Solomon's treasure, and it was huge amounts of gold in which they bought, 750 corporations with, which Eisenhower lost control of along with Nelson Rockefeller. But they also gained knowledge of the ancient tablets and scrolls that came from Mesopotamia and what the Knights of Templar guarded, all this ancient secret knowledge, which gave them an understanding of the matrix that we exist in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in other words, when they're creating this reality matrix using television, one of the primary psychological warfare tools, and entertainment industry and everything, what it is they are basically forming your agreed with sound and vision. They're actually showing you potential realities. Mm-hmm. This is why Tavistock in their research, they did two things. They found out that people, when they're under stress and in their fear, and they see violence and things like that. That's why on television and all the movies you see all these crime dramas, CSI, whatever,
mm-hmm. Right.
all where you have imagery of humans. Every channel you turn to, you have somebody with a gun shooting somebody or a knife or torturing someone. They get more into torture lately. Mm-hmm. And for children, they found that if they're exposed to early sexual stimulation, it creates like a neurotic child later. Mm-hmm. So all this works in order to maintain control of the population. See, the conscious mind, it basically it'll look at something and it'll say, "Oh, that's not right," or it'll say, "Oh, okay," but the subconscious mind says okay to everything. And so when you're watching television and you see something that you don't agree with, for example, say I was watching the news, and back when they were saying, "Oh, Korea's behind the Sony hack," and "Oh, yes," and they're beating the war drums against North Korea, and then they find out that there's absolutely no link to it at all. What they're trying to do, and also beating the war drums with several news reports that kind of keep pointing at Putin being the bad guy. Russia's bad. Russia's the perpetrator behind this and everything like that. You look at how they are engineering consent. They were doing this back in the 30s. It was called the process of, quote, engineering consent. And so what you do is you mentally, when you see something that's not right, pharmaceutical commercial that says, ask your doctor if it's right for you, and it's like the side effects are death, the bleeding ulcers, or whatever.
Right, yeah, mile long.
Just mentally say, whenever you see something that's not right, if you do watch television at all, just say, I don't give consent to that.
Right.
And what that does is, the more people that do not give consent to this reality that has been perpetrated upon us, because the science has shown that reality is holographic, and each conscious mind is connected through a global collective consciousness to every other conscious mind. They want to create the illusion through their education system and everything that everything is separate. In fact, the Michelson-Morley experiment they did way back in the turn of the century, the science says, everything's separate, but the Air Force found out later in the late 90s that everything is interconnected, but that never made it to the big, it's only if you look for, in quantum mechanics, quantum physics, that type of study, you start to see the entanglement of reality, and things like the double slit experiment, where the observer collapses the wave function. We change in a reality, and reality is an illusion, but a persistent one is that of. But a persistent one at that was what Einstein said. In that, an analogy that comes to my mind is, if you're looking at a fluorescent light, it's actually flashing off and on 60 times a second, but it appears to be solidly on. But the eye can only discern after 30 hertz per second that it's actually, so it appears to be solid. Reality has a similar function in that, as we believe the reality to be, the reality is recreated by our belief. And so what happens is the feedback loop is so fast and so hypnotic and illusionary that we don't see the pulses between the reality, that we are actually creating this reality that we're experiencing. And so this is knowledge that they prefer that we don't know, because if everybody becomes aware that another reality if you become aware of the glitches in this reality and say, hey, we can do better than that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We can create a different reality. In fact, I wrote this visualization called Imagine This. If you go to the webmatrix.net and click on Imagine This, it's basically a visualization of the children of the future looking back through a giant library of the future that has, like the Library of Alexandria in a way, that has all the true information of everything, and is living in a super advanced, peaceful civilization that's interacting with other advanced civilizations. And they're looking back through the history of Earth and all the challenges they had with this small group that gained control and deceived mankind, and that through the internet and the alternative media and the collective consciousness, what you and I are talking about, we're actually affecting this global collective consciousness just by putting our awareness here and talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're talking about multiple realities, and of course, and I've spoken about this before, but we do exist simultaneously as multidimensional beings in other parallel dimensions and universes. I mean, it gets really complex, but it's actually really true, because we're dealing with consciousness and energy once again. So what it appears, the way I see it is that we are overseeing this timeline to some degree and experiencing it from more of a parallax view. Now, if you were to look at it like that, now I have to ask you now, how does this linear world affect multiple realities? And is it possible that the multidimensional body can be affected to such a point by the matrix glitch that it gets or becomes trapped on a different dimensional space.
Yeah, we're our own jailers, actually.
Well, that's what I'm thinking about, because I'm wondering what kind of damage is this false matrix doing to multidimensional space? Have you ever thought of that?
Right. Right. Well, the ones that know this best are the extraterrestrials.
Right.
Because they are multidimensional beings. And, back in the 40s when, General Twining did his report, which I have up on the links, they're talking about, they were looking at this technology and it didn't make any sense to them. How do you operate this thing? It doesn't have any switches or levers or meters or knobs or rivets or anything. The whole thing was like it was just born out of the primordial space where it just was formed as one unit. Mm-hmm. And they found out there is a symbiotic relationship between the pilot of the craft and the craft itself, where the craft is actually imbued with its own consciousness that interacts with the ET pilot. Mm-hmm. And, the ETs that's why they can take people and move them through walls and things, because reality that we perceive is like an interference pattern, you could say, of a higher dimensional frequency, I guess you could say. And that, some of the work I did with Dr. Marcel Vogel, the first time I saw him, he was using a crystal that was specially cut to act like a laser that cohered thought. And coherence was where you have one very precise frequency and it's amplified. And that's how lasers can cut through steel like that. And he was able to dematerialize in front of my eyes and this other doctor a tumor that was on this woman's ankle, meaning that once you change the structuring on a higher dimensional level, it's like it pulls the carpet out from under the physical formation and it transforms immediately. It's not like the physical affects the higher frequencies. The higher frequencies affect the lower.
Right.
And so...
Exactly. Well, that's all part of multidimensional consciousness. And once again, it's interesting because the way I look at ETs, I call them off-worlders. But to me, they're a reflection of who we are. Really, that we are we are an extension of them, which means we're the same. Although we haven't been awakened to the fact that we are these multidimensional beings, but we are multidimensional, which means we have avatar abilities that we haven't yet accessed. Now, those of us who are connected to ancient mystery schools understand that and know how to, get into the realm of consciousness to a point where you understand how it affects reality, whether it's through holistic healing, frequency, and what you were talking about with the crystals.
We're, we've been trapped in a world of a lie,
mm-hmm.
Since our birth. We're I love that expression you use. It really is a world trapped in a lie.
Mm-hmm.
And
deception,
as it's starting to come out, it's kind of like a race to the finish line between those are the caretakers of the lie versus those that are waking up,
mm-hmm.
Almost in this world.
Right, and once again, how do you change the game? It seems to me like they have everything set in motion, but I believe that we can change the game through higher consciousness and navigating on a higher level of consciousness, because you can only change something if you're vibrating at a higher frequency, in my opinion. You can't change it if you're polarizing with the energy. You have to shift to a higher dynamic.
That is correct.
But I do know they run interference, like you were talking about the interference pattern, the holographics connected to the planet, which they're running an interference pattern to derail people or distract them, and all that's going on.
Yes, and and they, and they use this technology in detrimental ways, against us. So as you're well aware.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that. That's one of the reasons that I'm pushing for the exposure of the misuse of technology, which is a very lethal weapon and not a non-lethal weapon. So, and of course, that's something that's part of the Black Underground and the Black technology programs. And you look at the concept of the My Labs and things like that, where people are being inducted. Some of that's psychotronic programming. Some of the visuals that are being exposed to the target or screen memories are generated by the holographic, array system. So you got into the supercomputers a little bit there, and you're just touching on a little bit of the technology that's being exposed. But what about the stuff that's been in the underground for a very long time?
Right. What I'm talking about is mainstream media
Right.
stuff,
Yeah, exactly. So imagine, riddle me this, think about the other technology that we know is there that's really been the driving system behind the Matrix itself, if you ask me.
Yeah, well, as after we did the press conference with UK hacker Gary McKinnon hacked in the NASA, talked about non-terrestrial officers and their secret space program that they have. And, if you can imagine anything you can imagine, people have said, anything you've seen on Star Trek or any science fiction movie, they already have that. They have teleportation. They have all this stuff. They're keeping the rest of the planet retarded and using these dangerous technologies that continue to do damage to the planet. And, there's a Nazi mindset of eugenics and the master race, and the thin the herd down to 90% of the people. And you look at the GMOs and the vaccinations and the fluoride in the water and all the things that are done to the environment through all this beryllium and aluminum and the chemtrails. All this stuff is unnecessary. Because people could work together. I know they think. It's just as though they've purposely retarded us, and then stand back and look at those useless eaters. They're just using up the resources of the planet. But, we don't have to use the resources of the planet if they release the technology. So it's a catch-22 where you have these people who feel entitled to be the ruling elite of the rest of the human race on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the masses are a byproduct of their teachings, belief systems, and environment. That's the bottom line. So if they don't like the output, well, then stop giving them garbage. That's the bottom line. It's like a supercomputer. What are you putting into your computer? What are you putting into the database of mankind? And they've been feeding everybody bad data. So that's part of it.
Exactly. Yeah, garbage in, garbage out,
right.
As I say.
It's like psychic regurgitation on a global scale, but you've got it on so many different levels. And this is why I find it so foolish, and what a waste of psychic energy, what a waste of talent and energy and higher consciousness to be derailed into a false matrix where it doesn't serve anybody, maybe a few people, I don't know how many, but literally it really is a disservice on so many different levels. But I do believe we don't have to be victimized by anything unless we choose to be, which means we can break that cycle and break down the false matrix and rebuild on a higher level.
Well, we do have a power, and the power is that truth has a power that a lie does not have, because truth has a way of resonating, in each person. And also, they're a distortion. The true matrix is one of love. Mm-hmm. And everything is, if you look at the, look at the water experiments, where, loving thoughts show these geometries that are beautiful and symmetrical, and things of hate and whatnot, it shows a distortion.
Right.
So, and there's, one of the I almost liken the collective consciousness of the planet to an experiment that Dr. Vogel did. He took a small vial of water that came from Lourdes in France. It was a sacred spring. And he took a large vat of bulk water. That means it's totally unstructured or unpatterned. And he put the small little bit of vial of high energy water into and the entire vat of water took on that entire signature. Now, if you try to take a little vial of distorted low energy water that you put into a vat, it won't have the same effect. So the higher frequency repatterns the lower. So there's a power in truth and resonance and love that they're not tapped into.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that one, yeah. And what comes to mind, once again, and I mention this a lot, is the holographic repatterning. It's changing the matrix by higher consciousness once again, in that resonance wave, which I feel we can all create. You mentioned television, which I think does create enemy patterning. I believe it totally trashes the astral body and completely, to some degree, can even shatter it, depending on how much negativity people are watching per day. Things connected to violence and just dysfunctional things. That's not healthy for what I call the light body or the spirit.
Oh, yeah, and with the new high-definition television, it means that they can feed you to your subconscious mind, which they're already doing, and everything, programming that slips right through. Because the subconscious, is amazing. It picks up everything, and so unless you act upon it, you're getting programmed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, it seems to me like there needs to be a mass deprogramming. I wouldn't say re-education like they would like to put people in camps per se, but I'm talking about a mass deprogramming from false matrices and things that have been literally holding the evolution of mankind behind. And of course, that's I don't blame mankind per se, but I do know that there has been an agenda, obviously, that's been controlling and manipulating. And that's quite obvious, and that's why I think beings like you have come forward and communicate this information. And of course, like I said, I like the idea of the UFO disclosure, but I think it needs to go deeper, and I think it needs to go in realms of exposing the misuse of psychotronic hardware and remote access to brain hacking people, because that's a takedown. And I do know that's a lethal weapon, so I do want to expose that as best I can. That we're talking war crimes on a universal scale or basically a world scale.
Yeah, well, the extraterrestrial UFO ET issue is the key that opens this Pandora's box. That's the one thing they want to keep. Mm-hmm. They want to keep the lid on, because if you open that, this leads to one question, leads to another question, and start exposing the whole thing. The whole thing unravels from that point. It's like the one little thread on the fabric that you pull this one thread, and the whole thing just unravels before your eyes.
Exactly. Well, I see a lot of fires across the board, insofar as, every time we talk about something pertaining to opening up that obfuscation, we're lifting the veil a little bit, and we're showing what's going on, we're spotlighting the areas. So that's going to create more and more holes in their fabric, to a point where maybe we can just, completely rip open that fabric and expose it for what it really is.
Yeah, the world needs to operate on the golden rule. It's no longer, he who has the gold makes the rules, and disregard and no compassion for the rest of life on this planet and the planet itself. We need to evolve. I can't imagine, with their power structure where they basically everybody's fighting for control. Can you imagine a planet with just all these people who are fighting for control? They'll self-destruct each other in a matter of time.
Yeah, I always say
whereas
they eat
you had another planet where people treat each other how they would like to be treated. You have a possibility of a sustainable civilization.
Right.
And one that other sustainable civilizations out there, of which there are many, would like us to join, but they know that we're trapped in a deceptive illusion of the people, and that the governments are controlling. And it's not really the government per se or the CIA per se, but it's the cabals that are within the shadow governments that are operating. So they put their people in executive management positions in top positions because they have the money, resources, and power to do that. And so that's how, with a pyramidal type of structure, chain of command, so to speak, they maintain the control.
Right. I still think there's a level of, I'm wondering how sane they are, to be honest. It seems to me like they're insane. And I say that because I believe they've been exposed to a technological advancement that they weren't ready to handle on a consciousness level. And to me, that would create madness and insanity, and their behavior reflects that. So that's what I'm seeing, insofar as they just weren't evolved enough to the level they should be. And I'm even talking about the black technology departments that they shouldn't have acquired that information or that technology because they just weren't ready for it on a consciousness level. Yet they try to reflect it onto the masses like, well, the masses can't handle it. They can't handle it, for crying out loud. I mean, the masses could handle it if they weren't being lied to from day one. That's the bottom line.
Oh, yeah, they're narcissistic psychopaths, and even with the inbred bloodlines, which creates insanity, it's known. You have these people that are, you got the pedophile rings, you got the Satanists, you got all these people, and they all seem to kind of merge together as little leaks come out here and there of this cabal group that's the ones that are in control behind all these operations.
Right. Well, I really think the key to our evolution as a race is really enlightenment, unconditional love, and coexistence. And if they don't have those three components and they're not able to do that, I don't know what to say anymore, to be honest with you. But I do think it's important that we address the truth and we communicate as best we can what we're seeing. and hopefully people will register that on some level and remove all the false matrices that are controlling them.
Yeah, I do this every so often myself, just as my own exercise in dealing with, understanding of metaphysics, that every so often I go out on the balcony and take a deep breath in and release a breath that, seeing the world, seeing everybody, seeing this global awakening transform so that the deceptions become transparent. Mm-hmm. And, also put out, I had an experience in the mountains where I felt this intelligence coming out of the sky at night, and it was so strong that I reached my hand out and I said, "Is somebody out there?" Like that. And I called a girlfriend over and I said, "Do you see what I'm seeing?" A star came down and started bobbing up and down and flashing different colors. So and this was like in the 70s. So they do respond to thought. Mm-hmm. And I think there is like a prime directive where they don't want to interfere with our normal progress of evolution and figuring out our own problems. They're not going to come fix it for us. So, but, it wouldn't hurt to ask for a little assistance from all these guys out there that are in different dimensions.
Exactly. Well, they are our ancestors. Anyway, you look at it, we're star beings and we are a reflection of them. And obviously there is a psychic connection and there's something there. We as we observe, we affect reality to some degree. So I do believe that we are the star people we seek. We are those ancestors, and that we've been lied to, and we haven't realized our celestial heritage and birthright, which is huge. And I think that's one of the reasons they cover it up. And we are getting ready to wrap this up in about 4 minutes plus or minus here, Dan. But I wanted to thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's always incredible. And I know we didn't get through a lot of information pertaining to crystals and consciousness, and I do want to have you come back at some point and discuss that.
Oh, well, that would be great. Yeah, it's kind of a fun journey with you always. We never know what avenue we're going to get into.
It's funny because I had a lot of different questions and we pretty much didn't touch on any of them, but that's okay. I knew that was going to happen. We kind of go with the flow, and that always works just perfectly for me. And I do want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight, of course, and please stay tuned for Researcher on a Mission with Dr. J coming up next on the Dark Matter Radio Network. And of course, Dan, if people want to get in touch with you, I know they can access your website. Is there a contact information on there as well for you?
Everything is on there. If you go to www.thewebmatrix.net, it has my little, article, which kept getting longer and longer with references and everything, and it has contact information. They can contact me on Facebook at facebook.com/disclosure-witness.
Excellent.
That's the role I'm playing at the moment.
And that's an awesome website, by the way. You have so many excellent details on your website. I wanted to applaud you on that. Thank you for putting that informative information out there for everybody. It's really good. So what do you see? I know you're very sensitive and you're very intuitive. What do you see insofar as the pulse in this country right now? Are you getting a little bit of a red alert in your own psyche, or how are you feeling energetically about what's happening here in America?
I feel the cabal is kind of panicking because of the alternative media, a lot of people are starting to wake up. And, William Binney of the NSA, along with Snowden, was saying that the primary purpose is population control. So they want to control the population, obviously, and so they want to know what we're thinking. So, I think the more people become aware of consciousness within us and how we can affect and know that every thought that you're thinking out there does count, does matter, and does affect the collective that we're all connected to.
Right. And one thing I wanted to touch on real quick as we run out of time in the illusion of, but thoughts affect reality, as we know. And one thing I do know about the covert intelligence program and the artificial intelligence is that when they interface you with artificial intelligence, which is part of the transhumanism agenda, you literally, that will affect your reality because they will control, manipulate you to the best they can unless you really fight it. So what that will do is recreate programs internally for you to basically that are connected to what they want to manifest instead of what you choose to, which violates free will and universal law, obviously. So that's something to reflect on.
Yeah, well, we're not programmed dummies. We're spiritual beings that deserve truth, and we deserve freedom, and and we're not going to accept anything less.
Exactly. And I once again, I want to thank you for being out there on the front lines. I know you weren't expecting to do a lot of that, were you? I think, did you ever see that coming down the pike? Going out there and testifying? And
No, it's like one reality shift after another, from the military thing to going to Washington, and then the thing that hit it over for me was the article.
Wow. Well, we're out of time here. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Thank you, Keith. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, Solaris. Bye-bye.